But we are here right now with Josh Hill of Fansided for a weekly segment, A Song of Dan and Josh.
Yeah.
It's been a while since we did this, it feels like.
It's been a while. You left the country.
I did, and then last week we took it off for company fun reasons.
Yeah.
But now we're back. The series where Josh and I walk through every chapter of A Song of Ice and Fire, written by George R. R. Martin, peeling each apart, see what makes them tick, what makes them work. Does everything work? And today we are on Bran VII from A Game of Thrones, first book of the series. The chapter immediately after Arya 5, where Ned Stark is executed in King's Landing. This is the follow-up. This is the come down. This is kind of give you a little break after that intense thing. And Glenda says, hey, Josh. So does Linda. So does Julie.
Glenda, Linda, Julie. Hello. What do we have here? What is this? The smoked porter?
This is the Mother of Dragons smoked porter and Creek Ale blend. Probably saying that wrong. And Tony, I found out what Kush was, and I appreciate your comments.
It sat him down during the advertisement.
Now I seem like more of a square than usual.
Yes, we gave Dan an education in Kush.
Okay, so Bran 7.
Yeah.
So one of my questions to you is, like, I wonder if we lose something by doing it one chapter at a time, because this chapter, not a whole lot happened. I think, like, when I read it in isolation, it was a little dry. It was a lot of exposition about stuff. I think it would work better if it came right after the huge emotional high of Ned Stark getting executed, because this chapter, to me, when I broke it down, it's Bran Stark talking about the history of the Starks.
Yep.
Bran Stark talked about the history, the Children of the Forest. And then they do, I mean, there is some action, but mostly it's, to me, mostly this chapter is George R. R. Martin giving us history lessons.
Yeah.
How did they come across to you? What take away from this chapter?
I mean, there was a lot of exposition in here. World building, he likes to do this. He likes to give us this world that he's created in almost a forcing it down our throats way, but not a forcing it down our throats way. Because basically the entire chapter exists. I'm imagining Bran walking around pointing at things even though his legs don't work, so he's not doing that.
And he's being carried around and stuff.
But I agree. Like you're really setting up the Starks, the mythology of the Starks.
Yeah, it's a mythology-heavy chapter.
Yeah, so that if this would have been before the chapter that Ned dies, I feel like it would have been even more effective because you're setting this all up. You're setting up this mythology of the Starks. You're clearly then fortifying the idea that Ned is a main character. He's a guy who's going to be around because clearly we just spent this whole chapter talking about how important
his family and stuff.
Yeah, his family. But that's the thing. Then the twist would be it's not just Ned. It's the family. It's the blood of the Starks. It's not just
who are all very much alive, or a lot of them are.
Exactly. So I feel like maybe if this would have come before the Ned chapter, it would have been a little more effective. But it wasn't ineffective in that it got across this. It was a lot of explaining, like almost he was pointing at a map, or he was like writing on a chalkboard. He's like, "This is the family tree," and blah 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 blah. So
I mean, basically, like the skeleton. By the way, in the comments, people ask. Someone's putting mad faces on all the comments. I have no idea who's doing it. How curious. I'm sorry, everybody. It might be the Russian trolls, yes. Who apparently are responsible for people not enjoying The Last Jedi. Did you know that?
Yeah, it's true. Apparently they don't want people to enjoy Take the Black, but people enjoy Take the Black. So.
You can't stop us. Yeah, but the skeleton of this chapter is Bran's at Winterfell, and he gets a premonition that his father is in the crypts, in his crypt, where they carve out their tombstones and their crypts ahead of time because they're that kind of morbid people. And he's like, I want to go down there. And Maester Luwin, who I think deserves so much credit because he is here and he's basically become the father of Bran and Rickon, whose parents are away. And he's got the one kid who's telling him, I have prophetic dreams, and I need to go down to the crypt now. Look at my dead dad. And the other kid is like kind of a bloodthirsty little weirdo who has a really angry wolf who bites people. And he's a saint. I'm reading this back, and Maester Luwin is a saint. He is so patient with these kids, these crazy kids. And so they take Bran down to the crypts, and they walk him down to Ned Stark's tomb. And the walk, throughout the whole thing, he tells us about the Starks, their history. And it's almost silly and absurd almost to the point like how much he describes. Like he has this big passage where he's talking about all the dead Starks, and there's Bran the shipwright and Bran the burner, and he even says like, not me, another Bran, my father's brother. And I'm just like, it's almost like purposefully confusing that he names so many important characters Bran. And George R. R. Martin has said he does that because in actual history, if you looked at English history, like all the kings are named the same thing over and over and over, because that's just what you do.
Yeah.
And my question for you in that case is that admirable then to stick to that naming convention because it's historically accurate? Or is it like just call them different names because it's confusing because they all have the same name and it's hard to differentiate them apart?
Well, at some point, George R. R. Martin's going to run out of names or creative names to come up with.
Not.
So, no, I did
26
have a thought,
letters, infinite possibilities.
It's true. I did have a thought, though, because you mentioned The Matrix earlier, too. Like, Bran, like, there's so many different versions of Neo. Neo is like the 11th, the one,
Sure.
whatever like that. And Bran is like, maybe it's like some weird, like, time warp, but like there's all of these Brans.
That is a theory.
And all of this stuff. So, I don't know. But then there's also just the fact that George R. R. Martin was like, yes, they're all named Bran because it's history. Yeah. So then he kind of just rolled with that.
I mean, it is true. You look back,
It
it's
is
like
true.
every third king of France is named Charles. It just like goes back and back, or England rather.
And he has established that he likes to dig into history and kind
Yeah,
of
he
cherry
loves
pick
it.
certain things and put it, stitch this into his little quilt of his story.
I mean, this history in particular, and you might find this horribly boring, but I think it's interesting. We get into like the prehistory of Westeros here, where Bran and Maester Luwin explains about the Children of the Forest in kind of a goofy setup, where he's like, "Tell me about the Children of the Forest," and he's like, "Okay, here's a page and a half of what they did." Children of the Forest are these like magical creatures who live here before men were here, and the first men kicked them out or went to war with them. Then the Andals came, and then they invaded the first men, and that does roughly correlate to, the Celts being the first men who came to England over a land bridge long ass time ago.
That's good, yeah.
And then the Anglo-Saxons being the Andals, who came over on boats, after the first millennia. So the history of Westeros does metaphorically match up with the history of England. Now, is what I'm saying incredibly boring, or is this interesting?
No, it's interesting. The most interesting part is George R. R. Martin's not English, right?
I mean, he's not. He's clearly an Anglophile. Like, holy
But he's an
God.
Anglophile. Yeah, so that's interesting because there is all of these. I mean, we've talked about it in chapters before about it intersecting with certain, like the Kennedy assassination and things like that. So the idea that he's kind of purposefully aligned his story with, and it is a very medieval feeling story.
Right.
Like
And I mean, that stuff is purposeful. I want to underline that. Like, the Kennedy assassination thing I'm thinking is coincidental, but this whole trying to make the first one like the Celts and the Andals are like the Anglo-Saxon. The Children of the Forest are kind of like the native Druid Britain people who are all like, mystical and Stonehenge-y and crap.
Yeah, because when the show first came out, I mean, and I imagine the books maybe were the same way, but a lot of people that I knew thought it was going to be kind of like this historical, medieval, not necessarily a true story, but like grounded in reality, set in a certain like ancient English time, which it kind of has that feel to it. And it also has a kind of like From Dusk Till Dawn feel where it's like you think it's like a fantasy movie up until the point where it stops being that and becomes or you think it's not going to be.
Right. I guess.
Yeah. But they get that out of the way right away with the White Walkers in the first chapter, in the first like 10 minutes of the show. But they did have that
cool
kind of feel
choice, like back when you think about it, that they were there and then they haven't shown up since. That was an interesting choice in retrospect. I mean, part of the other reason he does all this history building stuff is because he wants to give the sense that Westeros is this very lived-in place that has a long history, and that kind of makes it. I think that's like catnip for nerds.
Oh, yeah.
Like, in a way. Like, certainly me. Like, when I was growing up and reading Lord of the Rings, like, the part of the reason it felt so much more vital and robust than other stories was because it had this history that I didn't. You don't have to explore it, but the fact that it's there makes it feel like more of just a full experience.
Yeah.
And that's what he's going for here by all this exposition, I think.
Yeah, and I think he's also thinking about an expanded universe, not in the same sense that we think about it now, where every single time we see a superhero movie, we're like, oh, they want an expanded universe. But like you mentioned, well, he obviously was a fan of fantasy too, so he read those
completely.
Lord of the Rings, and so he's kind of into that there's more going on here than just the story. And then like I grew up on literally it's called the expanded universe, the Star Wars novels that take the movies and it goes far beyond, and it goes to the future, and it goes back in time thousands and thousands of years. And now you see that all over the place, where you have Wikipedia pages that are dedicated to these very specific fandoms that go back thousands of years and go ahead to like the end of the universe. And
like complexity is an asset.
Yeah, so I really kind of like how it's not so much that George R. R. Martin like thought about that. I think it's more or less he was a product of
I think
that's
you're right.
the fantasy. But then he fully
Like
embraced it.
like that's what he loves. Like that's what he's into.
Yeah.
Do it. And he didn't know back when he was writing this that it would be like the thing.
Oh no.
to like be in vogue and do that kind of thing, because you're right, now everybody's trying to do that. Okay, so beyond the exposition, a couple things did happen in this chapter. Not a lot, but some. So they go down to the crypts. Maester Luwin, saintly Maester Luwin, Bran, and Osha, who's filling in for Hodor, because Hodor won't go down to the crypts. He's too scared. Which
Cuddly Hodor
is sort of like big old teddy bear. It's kind of like, because there were a couple of horror tropes here. Like you have like like in the horror film, like the dog like won't pass a threshold because it's like, oh, he knows something.
Yeah.
No, they have a sixth sense. Like Hodor's the dog in this situation, where he won't go down into the crypts, and also the direwolves don't want to, but they do. And then there's this passage where they get down and they arrive at Ned's crypt, and Maester Luwin's like, "See, you idiot, there's nothing there." And then the line is like, "The darkness lunged at him." It was very intense. And Shaggy Dog, Rickon's direwolf, is there. And he just tears into them. And in the light of the guttering torch, shadow wolves 20 feet tall fought on the wall and roof. And Rickon's kind of down there. And I think another horror trope, like the creepy kid, who's like, "Father was dead. I came down here to see him." And he has like this rabid dog with blood dripping from his mouth there, just sitting there like, "Of course I would be down here. Father's gone. He came to me in a dream." And Maester Luwin's like, "Okay, a little weird."
Saintly.
Which
Maester Luwin.
I thought that was also very kind of horror-y. It's what I got, like a Shining vibe from that kind of thing.
Yeah, I got.
And it was an intense scene all around.
Yeah, I definitely got the horror vibes from that too. It reminded me of that chapter with John where it ended with the white kind of jumping on him and he's trying to choke it. And like the description of like the fingers going down his throat.
Oh gosh, I remember that.
That was kind of a horror. So it's kind of like, I do enjoy how this is, and kind of like, again, what we were just saying about the show is a fantasy show that you don't think is a fantasy show initially. This does kind of bob and weave between different genres while still being a fantasy book.
Yeah,
it's very
still
much
being
a fantasy
coherent.
world. Yeah, he splices in like, you know, almost like romance novel descriptions of characters.
Totally.
And then he goes all the way to like Stephen King, The Shining, horror stuff. So I really do like how it kind of bounces back and forth between all of these things and isn't just one thing. So I can see why you know, we just talked about how he didn't know it was going to be a thing, this expanded universe. But you can see why somebody would read this, like an executive would read this and be like, holy crap, like this is what we need.
Julie says, "The crypts were more creepy in the books. Loved the descriptions." Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
To contrast them?
They were very, very creepy.
They were effective. Like,
you felt it. You felt the crypts.
They're a lot bigger, I feel like, in the books. Everything's bigger in the books. Just impossibly bigger, really.
Yeah.
Like you could possibly do it on screen. But it does work. And yeah, that was a good scene. And then, of course, at the end, the creepy psychic dream boys are correct. Yeah. Ned was dead, and that's kind of the climax as they find out Ned's dead.
Yep.
Which is, I mean, obviously that's what we're going to deal with. This is literally the aftermath of Ned Stark's death. We dealt with it kind of metaphorically with the dreams and the backstory. And I mean, literally with the Raven, hey, he's dead, we need to make it up.
Yep.
And Maester Luwin, it's going to be weird for him, right? He's like this guy who's like his job in this chapter is to say, magic's gone, children of the forest are gone, dreams are just dreams, you stupid weird kids, nothing's real, it's all just science. And then he, at the end, is like, oh no, you guys were right, and he is dead. I'm going to have to adjust my parameters a little bit.
Yeah.
I like him a lot. I'm enjoying Maester Luwin in this reading.
I'm big on Maester Luwin
more than I
too.
thought. He's a hero. Yeah. That's about it. It wasn't a hugely eventful chapter, but dense as always.
Yeah, and it was descriptive. Like, it was, you know, aside from the exposition, but we were just talking about the crypts, like you feel the isolation of being in just such a large setting. Which is, again, you said it spot on. You can't get that on the show. Like, I mean, imagine you could somehow like green screen like very small actors in a very big room, but just the way that he engulfs you in this, the descriptions of the crypt.
Yeah,
it's
I get where you're coming
cold.
from.
Like it's just a very, you feel where you are, and it was very effective.
Yeah, it was good stuff. Any other thoughts, Josh, on Bran 7?
No.
All right. Then I think we can sign off next week and come back with Sansa 6,
All right.
where Joffrey makes Sansa look at her dead father's head, which is a good one, I thought. I recall enjoying that one. I mean, not enjoying, just
Yeah.
whatever.
That's not on the dating textbook. They cut that chapter out. Don't use that as a date.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Here at Take the Black Live. Thanks for putting up with my technical difficulties at the beginning. Remember, Brewery Gang, thanks for the Mother of Dragons blended ale. Happy trails to the person who won the costume contest, and we'll see you next week, Wednesday, 4 p.m. for more Take the Black Live, more Song of Dan and Josh. See you then.